Well, good morning out there. We are glad to have you with us this morning. A little bit late. I live in Monrovia and had to deal with the fire that's going on up in that area, the Bobcat fire. But everything's fine. We're doing well. Just a little late this morning. We are teaching on Old Testament instances of rebellion. Now, I understand after 50 years in the ministry, I am quite aware that the average Christian church has a little knowledge about authority, submission and authority. A few years ago, a group headed up by Bob Mumford had some wonderful teachings on submission and authority and caused lots of controversy. The church didn't like it. They rejected it. But today we want to talk about another case of God dealing with rebellion. And in this instance, it's the reviling of Aaron and Miriam, the brother and sister of Moses, who was chosen by God, made authority to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. Let me read our text for you this morning, and you have a full understanding of what's going on here. It says, "And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. For he had married a Cushite woman, an African American." Well, she wasn't American, she was an African. She was a black lady, and they did not like that. And they said, "Hath Jehovah indeed spoken only with Moses? Hath he not spoken also with us?" Well, if he had spoken to them, they sure didn't listen to him, because they got themselves into a heap of trouble. And Jehovah heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men that were upon the face of the earth. He was very mild-mannered and meek. And Jehovah spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, "Come out, ye three, unto the tent of meeting." And the three came out. And Jehovah came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the door of the tent, and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. And he said, "Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, Jehovah, will make myself known unto him in a vision. I will speak with him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so. He is faithful in all my house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even manifestly, and not in dark speeches. And the form of Jehovah shall he behold. Wherefore, when ye are not afraid to speak against my servant," against Moses, they aroused the anger of God by speaking against Moses. They saw him as their brother. They should have saw him as authority. That's a classic error that people make. Well, I know that person and I don't like them. You don't have to like them. If they have authority, then you need to be under that authority or come under that authority. And the anger of Jehovah was kindled against them. And he departed, and the cloud removed from over the tent, and behold, Miriam was leprous. She got leprosy, as white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, "O my Lord, lay not, I pray thee, this sin upon us. For that we have done foolishly." Now they realize their error, their mistake, "and for that we have sinned. Let her not, I pray, be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed when it cometh out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried unto Jehovah, saying, Heal her, O God, I beseech thee. We are talking about Aaron and Miriam, the older brother and sister to Moses. And they have spoken against Moses, come against him, and God is angry. And we pick it up with, O my Lord, lay not, I pray thee, this sin upon us, for that we have done foolishly, and for that we have sinned. They recognize their folly, their failure. Let her not, I pray, be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed when he cometh out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried out, Jehovah, saying, Heal her, O God, I beseech thee. And this is what God says to Moses. And Jehovah said unto Moses, If her father had spit in her face, she should not be ashamed 7 days. In other words, she should be in isolation for 7 days if her father had spit in her face. Let her be shut up without the camp 7 days. So God says she is going to be punished. I'm not going to let this slide by. And after that, she shall be brought out again. And Miriam was shut up without the camp 7 days. In other words, she had to go into isolation. And the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. Numbers 12. So what does this tell us after they spoke against their younger brother Moses? See, they saw him as their younger brother. That was the mistake they made. My first point is to speak against representative authority incurs divine wrath. We don't seem to get that in the church of the New Testament. We have churches full of rebellious people. And they don't understand that they're in big trouble. It could be affecting their family life, their jobs, any number of things. So Aaron and Miriam were elder brother and sister to Moses. Remember, Miriam helped her mother save Moses as a baby. Thus, in the home, Moses should be subject to their authority. He was the youngest. But in the calling and work of God, he became the authority. And they should have subjected themselves to Moses' authority, even though he was their younger brother. They were not happy with the Ethiopian woman whom Moses had married. So they spoke against Moses by saying, Hath Jehovah indeed spoken only with Moses? Hath he not spoken also with us? Now Miriam was a prophetess, because at times in the Bible you see songs that she penned and Israelites sing. So we know an Ethiopian is an African, a descendant of Ham. Moses should not have married this Ethiopian woman, according to Miriam and Aaron. As an older sister, Miriam could reprimand her brother on the basis of their family relationship. But when she opened her mouth to slander, she touched upon the work of God's challenging the position of Moses. Moses was in charge. Moses was the authority. God had entrusted his delegated authority in the work to Moses. How wrong it was for Aaron and Miriam to attack Moses on the basis of a family reason. It was God who had chosen Moses to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt. Nevertheless, Miriam despised Moses. For this God was greatly displeased with her. and he has leprosy come upon her, allows it. She could deal with her brother, but she could not deal. Instead, she reviled God's authority. The trouble was that neither Aaron nor Miriam recognized God's authority. That's what we run into today. The average person doesn't have a clue about authority. It's never taught. In standing on natural ground, they conceived a rebellious heart. They were rebellious. But we notice that Moses does not answer back. He knew that if he had been set in authority by God to be in authority, we need not defend ourselves. If you're in authority and you're being attacked, ignore it. God will deal with those who slandered you. Whoever reviled him touched death. So long as God gave him authority, he could remain silent. Now, there's a good example. A lion, we all know a lion, needs no protection, since full authority lies within the lion. Moses was able to represent God in authority because he had first been subject to God's authority. He learned authority through suffering, but he learned it well. For he was very meek above all men who were upon the face of the earth, the Bible says. The authority which Moses represented was God's own authority. And no one can take away God-given authority. Rebellious words ascend to heaven and are heard by God. When Aaron and Miriam sinned against Moses, they sinned against God. It's the same today as it was then. The God who was in Moses, that's who they were really talking about. The anger of the Lord was kindled against them. God despises this lack of authority. Whenever man touches God's delegated authority, he touches God within that person. That's what they don't see. Sinning against delegated authority is sinning against God. And the thing we have to understand in all of this is that authority is God's choice. There was a time when I said, why would God ever choose me as a pastor, as a man of authority? It's not man's attainment. God summoned the three to the tent of meeting. We just read that. Aaron and Miriam without any hesitation, because they thought God must be on their side. That's what people usually think. Well, I'm right, you're wrong. They come into the pastor's office with their minds made up. They don't hardly ever come in and say, you're my authority, I've been with you for years, I trust you. This is the decision that I've come to. What do you think about that decision? They never do that. They come in and start running their mouth. This is what I'm going to do. They've made up their mind. They couldn't have consulted God, because their authority is sitting there in amazement, thinking they're completely out of the will of God. So they thought God was on their side, as rebellious people usually, especially religious rebellious people. And also because they had much to say to God, since Moses had caused all these troubles in the family by marrying an Ethiopian woman. Must have been eating at them. But God proclaimed that Moses was his servant, who was faithful in all his house. How dare they speak against his servant? Spiritual authority is not something one attains to by effort. It is given by God to whomever he chooses. How very different is the spiritual form in the natural. People in the natural just think, I'm in charge. I'm in charge of my own life. God himself is the authority. Beware lest we offend. Whoever speaks against Moses speaks against God's chosen one. Let us never despise God's chosen vessel. How did God show his anger over what they had done? He brought leprosy upon Miriam. And the cloud departed from the tent. God's presence was lost immediately. That cloud was the sign of God's presence. Miriam, it says, became leprous as snow. This leprosy, by the way, did not come through contamination. It was clearly a chastisement of God. God was chastising her for her rebellion. To be leprous was in no way better than to be an Ethiopian woman. Miriam's inward rebellion was manifested in outward leprosy. And she who had thus become leprous must be isolated, losing all communication with others. She had no authority in a sense. It was all taken from her. So when Aaron saw that Miriam was leprous, he turned to the only one he could turn to, his brother, his little brother. Finally, he realized, well, I guess you are in authority. Will you meditate and pray for a healing? What was God's response? He said, if her father had spit in her face, she should not be ashamed 7 days. She should be punished at least 7 days. And so God shuts her up out of the camp for 7 days. Then in God's mercy, due to intercession, that's why we intercede today. That's why we pray today. He heals her after 7 days. And by the way, everybody in the camp had to set this out. She didn't just affect herself, she affected everybody. They were all delayed 7 days. Wherever there is rebellion and reviling among us, we shall lose the presence of God, and the earthly tent becomes immovable. God's pillar of cloud will not descend until those words of reviling have been dealt with. If this matter of authority is not resolved, all else becomes void and vain. Now we're going to pick it up tomorrow, where God has to deal with the entire nation of Israel as rebellion begins in leadership. And you'll be amazed at how God deals with that. I mean, it is amazing how God hates rebellion and how prevalent rebellion is in the church. And these are the famous words that a pastor hears. I hate hearing this. Oh, Pastor Gary, I'm one of your mighty, mighty men. I'm going to stand with you forever. You can count on me. And I usually say to myself, well, they'll be gone in 2 weeks. That's sad for a pastor to get to that point in his life. But that's what pastors have to listen to. You know, hardly does anyone in rebellion come in for counsel. They come in to tell the pastor what they're going to do, and there's nothing the pastor can say or do to stop them. They're rebels. And they're walking around in a state of rebellion, and somehow Satan has made them believe that they're prophetic prophets, mighty men and women of God. They're rebellion. They're in rebellion. They're rebellious. And pastors, just step back. Don't worry about it. Nothing you can do. God will deal with it. Their life will go into a tailspin. They may lose their job. They may lose their profession. can't pay for their cars. And to me, the saddest thing is usually rebels lead their whole family into rebellion. The family thinks, well, that's my dad or my mom. I have to be obedient to them. And they're led into absolute oblivion, disaster. See, to be under authority is protection. It protects you if you will understand that and allow and submit to your authorities. A pastor is good for you, not bad for you, if you'll only listen.